Welcome to MensNet. We're glad you're with us. My name is Mel Feit. I'll be hosting today's show. Tony Nazzaro is our executive producer. All right, we're going to ask a question on today's show I think everyone's going to know the answer to. I think you'll know the answer. I think all of our panelists will know the answer. You know, I don't have a clue, really. The question up for discussion is, why do men go to see prostitutes? And the answer, I guess the obvious answer is to have sex. Okay, here's what I don't understand. I don't understand how any man with any sexual self-respect could pay a woman to pretend to be interested in him, to pretend to want to have sex with him, to pretend to be enjoying herself with him. I mean, I've never done it, but I would think it would have to be the most degrading experience possible. I mean, maybe I should just speak for myself, but for me personally, the great pleasure, the power of a sexual relationship with a woman, at least in part, is that we're both kind of, exposed to each other. There's a vulnerability that we share in an intense way that leads to a kind of truth-telling. And if you think about it, that's the essence of intimacy. You can't have intimacy without truth-telling. But with the prostitute, it's all a lie. It's a pretense. It's an act. It's an animal act. I mean, if you need a sexual release, just masturbate. And as I thought about the subject for this show, here's what occurred to me. I think it's possible that the relationships that men have with women, and when I say men, I'm not talking about all men, I mean some men. I think it's possible the relationships that some men have with women, and when I say women, I don't mean all women, some women, maybe their relationship seems something like, prostitution. I mean, let's be honest about it. Men often pay for the pleasure of women's sexual company. They usually bear a greater financial burden during dating and courtship, in relationship, in marriage. Men pay through the nose during divorce. The relationships that men and women often have together are defined by some combination of sex and money. Sex and money. There's a name for that, right? Sex and money. Oh yeah, prostitution. At least the prostitute is honest about it. At least she's not pretending the way other women pretend. And when I say other women, I'm not talking about some other women. I mean all women. Every woman I've ever met has in some way pretended it's not about the money. At least the prostitute isn't pretending about that. So maybe, in a really strange, pathetic way, the relationships that some men have with their prostitutes wind up being the most honest, therefore the most intimate relationships they have with women. How sad is that? Anyway, it's just a theory. Let's see what our panelists have to say. This should be interesting. Joining us to have this discussion is Dr. Bernice Bernhard. She's a clinical psychologist, a licensed New York State psychologist. She's been in private practice for 30 years. She has offices in Midtown Manhattan and Yorktown Heights, New York. And she is a first-time guest on MensNet, and we welcome you to the show. Thank you for being here, Bernice.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Also on the panel is David Behar. David is a family therapist with a special area of expertise in men's issues, and he has the courage to come back to MensNet for the second time. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
And we wanted to add to our panel one of our favorite MensNet contributors, Paula Young. Unfortunately, Paula was not available, so instead we booked a Paula Young impersonator, and I have to say, very close. Something's a little bit different, I'm not sure, but it's very close.
The breast implants.
Well, that and something else.
No,
okay.
I dyed my hair.
Welcome
it's
back.
really great.
Welcome
Thank you,
back,
man. I wanted to
Paula.
look more like you.
Thank you, Paul. I think. Okay, let's start with Bernice, if that's okay with you. Okay, I really do want to understand it, so explain it to me. Tell me why you think men go to see prostitutes.
Well, I'll say when you first called me and I said yes, immediately I wrote down, once I said yes, 9 different reasons.
Okay.
And we'll get to them, but let me just respond to what you said.
Please.
Somewhere today we'll talk about the first part, but the second part about men paying for sex anyway, I just have to say my inclination was like it was sort of a misogynistic statement, and I want to say, Mel, like in the country music, who done you wrong?
Do you feel offended by it?
Not personally.
Are you insulted by it?
No, not at all, no. I think it's sort of sweet and charming, and I'd like to talk to you about it personally another time. But let me stay on topic, though.
Okay.
I went, and when I wrote down my 9 issues, it went from like a frat boy kind of thing, where you go as a group, and it's purely for sex. I mean, and sometimes in that age from 18 to 25, you also don't want to admit that you're a virgin, and there are a small percentage of guys, 18 to 25, that have never had sex, and going to a prostitute, you can sort of make your mistakes there or maybe even learn. So you have this group. It's purely biological. It's purely driven because of a physical need. That's one kind. And then all the way at the other spectrum, a kind of clinically difficult person. They may not be on what we call the spectrum between autism and Asperger's, but they are so shy, and I'm sure you've met men like this. They are so shy that if they go to a supermarket and they see a neighbor, they will go down the different aisle not to say hello. They do not have a friend, much less have a date. And so for them, they will go see a prostitute for sex, number one. But unfortunately, also, they tend to go to the same person over and over again because they have the fantasy that I have a relationship with this person.
Well, that's delusional, is
That's
it not?
very delusional.
So maybe one of the answers
And
to
I'm
why
going to
men...
send them to men.
Well,
Mel, because that's his specialty.
Well, maybe one of the reasons that men go to see prostitutes, then what you're implying is that they're delusional in a way.
But I'm talking about one of my 9 types. This is a very, very disturbed person, and you need to help him with the shyness and the social phobia. It's really not about going to see a prostitute. He has problems. To address what you said, that men are paying for it anyway, in marriages, some are, so of course I was not offended. And I think the way some men are, if they're passive, really nice guy, but their wife is just the boss about everything, about the money, about the kids, about where they live, about holidays, about how to spend it. And they never say no because they don't want to get their head bitten off. And so they act out. It isn't even about sex. It's about a 14-year-old saying, I'm not going to listen again.
Right, but that happens to women too in marriages, and they don't act out in the same way. They don't pay for sex, so there's something different about men and women here.
Things are changing, and we'll talk about that maybe as things are changing because of the internet.
All right, here's what I need some help understanding, then we'll get the other panelists into it. For me, Bernice, the sex drive is such a powerful thing because it's not just about body parts. It's not for a man just about breasts and a vagina. When I'm attracted to a woman, it's the woman. It's her female sexuality. It's how she feels about herself, about how she feels about me.
And you're right.
But the prostitute doesn't bring any of that to the encounter. It's just her body. And are you telling me that there are men really attracted to just that? Because I have a hard time
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there are reasons. But there are reasons.
There are reasons why they're just attracted to that?
Yeah, I mean, Playboy magazine has been selling forever. Pornography's been selling forever. Men's sexuality is much more visual and genital than female sexuality.
Absolutely.
Female sexuality has much more to do with emotional connectedness and about the body as a whole rather than just the genitalia. And I mean, there's great exception to this. I'm speaking in aggregate terms.
All right,
but
I'm sorry. I get your point. I just want to say something. Because I think it's a good point you're making. But for me, there's a big difference between the visual depiction of a thing and the thing itself. There's a difference between pornography and that kind of fantasy and prostitution. Do you not see that distinction?
I do see the distinction, and I think that men's culture is really the culture of pigs. Men are pigs more often than women, for lack of a better term. And I think, and it isn't meant in a pejorative way, I think it has a lot to do with hormones. I think the more testosterone a person has, the more trouble they're likely to get in general. And I think that, for example, if I gave you testosterone gel, you would be more likely to want to act out sexually, more than likely. And paradoxically, if I gave you a testosterone blocker, you would probably cry more and want more emotional connectedness. There's a lot of research.
You were on the show before, and I asked you what drives male sexual desire, and what you said then was there's a sense of conquest, which is an interesting answer, and I think you're probably partially right about it. But look, Dave, the prostitute is a hired hand, so to speak. I mean, if I want to hire someone to mow the lawn, I go to the Yellow Pages, I look under gardeners, I negotiate a price, he comes, he cuts the grass, I don't feel a sense of conquest. I don't understand, there's no emotional connection with the prostitute, there's no sense of conquest, she's not going to have your baby, you're not going to be making a baby. What's the thrill, what's the attraction?
I think sex is narcotic.
The 2 areas, like you said, testosterone is one, and the other one is dopamine. It becomes addictive.
Right.
The lying becomes addictive.
I have to
sneaking.
disagree a little bit. And I'm really surprised to hear you say that it's testosterone based. I'm a woman, and I have as much sexual drive, if not more, than a lot of men.
But women have testosterone.
Well, I realize that, but I'm not driven to conquer man, but I enjoy sex. And I just thought it was oddly almost reverse misogynistic for you to say because in a way we're pigs. I don't think so. I think we're culturally developed